Hey everybody, it's Joe Bro, and welcome back to Paper Mario Month. How you doing today? Alright, here's the thing. This is gonna be a very long video ranking every chapter in the series, so I don't really have time to chat you up with a long intro. If you want editing, high quality jokes, and a good storyline from a Joe Bro video, go watch one of my other recent uploads. Sorry. But there's no time, we gotta go. We have 43 Paper Mario chapters to rank here, so that's what we're gonna do. This list will include every chapter minus the prologues from all 6 Paper Mario games, but it's important to note that I'm basing the Thousand Year Door entries off of the original GameCube versions of its chapters, not the Switch remake. Lastly, this is my very subjective opinion, and I'm warning you now, I'm not very kind to Sticker Star and Color Splash, so just be prepared for that. And hey, while we're at it, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what your favorite chapters are in the comments below. As most of you agree, Sticker Star is not a good game at all. Unfortunately, most of its chapters round out the bottom of this list, and for good reason. And World 3's jungle is the absolute worst of the litter. The level design is atrocious, the muddy visuals are repetitive, and good grief, it has 12 levels. You'll also need to backtrack to several of the dozen courses to chase down the Wiggler segments, and it is an obnoxious chore. I suggest checking out Chuggaaconroy's Sticker Star videos, as he bravely deep dived into this game more than I ever will, but he calculated that this chapter consumes roughly 40% of the game's courses. Disgusting. Wiggler is an okay character and the blooper boss has excellent music, but it's otherwise a horrid chapter and easily last place. I have a confession to make. While I did replay 4 of the 6 games in preparation for making this list, I did not replay the putrid Sticker Star or Color Splash. As a result, I don't have much to say about their entries, as they've grown a bit hazy, thankfully. But nonetheless, I do recall that Sticker Star's finale, World 6, is repulsive. It contains only 2 proper levels, and the final course is so bad. It's just a long, redundant hallway capped off by the worst final boss in Mario RPG history. Bowser still fails to utter a single word of dialogue in this climax, and the boss gameplay loop is abhorrent. I never want to make it this far in the game ever again, which, luckily, should make for an easy task. Sticker Star's World 2 is no better. It's a desert of creativity, and the moment in the game you realize it's just bad. It's gonna be a bad game. What else to say here? It's ugly, the gameplay sucks, the backtracking for thing stickers sucks. It all sucks. Pass. The volcano-themed World 5 is another horrendous chapter from Sticker Star. It's all around bad as usual, and the Petey Piranha boss is particularly offensive. The trick to this one is just spamming Infinijumps for like 15 minutes. Ow. Yeah, it's painful. Thanks, game. Thanks a lot. The one good thing is at least we get a couple of references to Goombella and Parakarry here, but the references are trash in the freaking dump. Literally. So, I can't keep doing this. This game sucks. Well, would you look at that? Can you believe it? Another Sticker Star chapter. The game's initial world isn't quite as bad as the aforementioned courses, but that may only be because the game has yet to grind your nerves only a couple hours in. World 1 is kinda pretty in 3D, I guess, and there's nothing truly terrible about it, but come on, it's still a void of creativity compared to the other games. There's only one Sticker Star chapter remaining, and as much as I'd love to wrap that game up and move on, I can't. Honestly, the game has one decent chapter, so we're gonna have to move on over to Super Paper Mario for this next entry. Hey now, drop those pitchforks, you crazy people. Ranked 38 is Sammer's Kingdom, and for good reason. It's not exactly a proper chapter. What begins with a tedious and repetitious gameplay loop of literally fighting enemies for over half an hour, then becomes walking in a straight line for a while. Great, I love that. Once landing in the underwear, the chapter does improve, for sure, but it also just spoils a better chapter, which is, chapter 7. I get that the story here is great, but come on, the gameplay is trash. I know some of you like it, but I don't. Color Splash's yellow paint star is the worst to collect. Not only is the yellow desert area the least visually pleasing of Color Splash's worlds, but the Golden Coliseum isn't well designed, nor is the boss fight with Iggy. Black Bowser's Castle is the bland finale to Color Splash. I don't care for the gameplay, the story, the level design, and by this point in Color Splash, I'm just exhausted. I appreciate that Bowser, talks this time, and his consumption by black paint is a pretty cool element, but no, it's just not a good finale, for me at least. Alright then, we're finally back over to wrap up Sticker Star. Shockingly, World 4 is not terrible. It's not exactly good either, but hey, I'll take what I can get. The music across the entire chapter is remarkable, and the clear highlight for the entire game is the Enig Mansion. It's been a while since I've played it, but the area's mini-story is a fun time. The visuals are nice, and the gameplay is really good for the only instance in this abomination of a video game. If only the developers could have just, I don't know, made every level good? Like this one? Is that too much to ask? Really? As we shift away from the weak chapters into the decent ones, I'll preface the orange paint star by saying it's not bad, I just don't like it. Thinking back to this chapter, the entire thing is soured and ruined by the stupid steak. God, I hate it so much. So much. Why is there meat, like raw animal meat, in a Paper Mario game? And why is the gameplay to prepare it so atrocious? Ignoring that obscenity, the levels here are okay. The Sunset Express is fun, and I'm sorry this Toad's wife left him. Whoa, an outer space chapter? How cool! I can't believe I get to play Mario in space before Mario Galaxy comes out. That was my reaction to Super Paper Mario's 4th chapter back in good old 2007. Oh, little Joe Pro, how your excitement was in vain. You see, this chapter isn't very good. Yes, the Woe Zone is really solid, and Planet Blobule, I think, is mostly forgivable, but the other 2 chapters are just pointless, boring romps through space. Oh, fun! Moving slowly through a dark 2D maze environment? Oh, fun! Let's do the same thing, but again! I want to like this chapter. It has Mr. L, Squirps, and a great final level, but most of it is such a slog. Color Splash's 1st chapter is a fine one. It's very pretty, Morton is a decent boss, and the storyline and progression is charming, but it's still Color Splash, so it's still crushed by a crap battle system, a lack of character variety, and things. The absolute best part about this chapter, however, is the delightful music for Cherry Lake, which is easily one of the game's best soundtracks. The blue paint star is marginally more fun thanks to the well-themed and designed dark blue inn. Keeping with the best levels being the ghostly mansion ones, Color Splash proved it can be half decent when it chooses to be. This chapter also includes Sniff It or Whiff It, which is a fun time. So yeah, not too bad, I like it well enough. Land of the Cragnons is usually pretty hated by fans, but I guess I think it's okay, if not very good. The characters within these levels are fun, and the boss fight and design for King Crocus is something, that's for sure. The level design is crap though, and forces you to waste your time. Wow, isn't Super Paper Mario such a good game? Don't kill me, it's okay. While I have had a love-hate relationship with the Origami King, I can commend it for having some wonderfully creative level design and inventive locations. In fact, this video is actually the first time in my entire channel's history that I'm talking about Origami King, so I'm probably going to go on and on about some of these chapters a little bit longer than other entries on this list. Of its 6 lengthy chapters, Chapter 4's Purple Streamer is my least favorite. This chapter is huge in scope, but with considerable filler. Its setting is within Origami King's Great Sea, but the sea is vast and rarely filled with anything of interest. The sea is not particularly fun to traverse via boat and submarine, and since you will have already traveled here in Chapter 3, this feels like retreading ground. There's a lot to complain about for this chapter. The submarine interior looks nothing like a Paper Mario game. There are an abundance of forced battles, and there's some sticker star PTSD courtesy of the fan thing. Ugh, I'd rather forget about things, thank you very much. On the other hand, this is one of the chapters that propels the main story forward the most with its inclusion of the Origami Craftsman Toad. I also think that the 3 trials in which you receive a Power, Courage, and Wisdom orb are mostly fun and a nice Zelda reference, though the challenges are really easy and not as creative as those in older games. The Ice Temple is fine, but I do really enjoy the theme and gameplay of the Sea Tower, which serves as the final dungeon. As always, the bosses in Origami King are annoying trial and error gameplay crap and stupid stationary, so that's a problem in every boss fight, including this one. Also, using your discretion to choose one of the 4 elementals to solve puzzles is cool, but wildly overdone, which halts the pacing to a crawl for each instance. You have to solve so many copy-paste puzzles with them, and it's honestly exhausting. Chapter 4 is bloated and messy, but Origami King only gets better from here. I don't remember Color Splash's purple paint star extraordinarily well, but I do remember that I liked it, at least more than I liked most of the game. It was a big step in the right direction for sure. The pirate theme is fun, the music is great, and I don't recall despising any of the individual courses really. It's kind of an epic adventure from what I recall, so yeah, that's good. I'll take it. Good job, Color Splash, good job. Now, the green paint star, on the other hand, I remember quite a bit better, and I'm here to tell you it's my favorite world in Color Splash. At only 27th place, that isn't much of an accomplishment, but hey, the game should take what it can get from me. I think what stands out for me on this game's penultimate chapter is the wide variety of locations you explore. Red Pepper Volcano, the Sacred Forest, and the gorgeous Emerald Circus. You even get to complete a fun Super Mario Bros. 3 segment that for me was one of the game's few highlights. Overall, a pretty solid chapter. While there's nothing notably awful about Lineland, there's absolutely nothing great either. It's an incredibly basic introductory chapter that is so simple and short. Compare Chapter 1-4 to the Koopa Brothers Fortress, for example. It's visually uninspired and flat. The layout is basic with very few branching paths, and it's completely forgettable. You can also beat the entirety of Chapter 1 in about 30 or so minutes. This chapter truly demonstrates how Super Paper Mario fails to carry over the series' RPG roots and is instead focused on being a very basic platformer. Now, with that said, Fractale is pretty cool. I do like Fractale, especially how you can just stay on top of them. That's pretty cool. Upon first inspection, Gloam Valley seems way better than Lineland, and like it's one of the best chapters in the series. It has bopping music, the mansion theme is great, way more RPG elements are here, and a wonderful character is Mimi. I love Mimi, she's great. However, and this is a very massive however, the gameplay sucks. It's so bad. We'll get to 2-3 in a moment, but Super Paper Mario's level structure already negatively impacts the immersion and flow of this chapter. Rather than being able to freely explore the mansion with the impression that it's a real place, it's broken up into 3 isolated courses. Level 2-2 is a nothing level that takes about 5 minutes max to complete. You literally just go into the right room, grab the key, and it's over. That's it. It just ends. It's over. It's so quick. 2-4 is a really bad finale. Remember the elaborate dungeons from the first 2 games? Well, this isn't one of them. There are no keys, every room looks the same, and I cleared the boss without her getting a single move out. The Merly guessing game would be a fun intermission that I would very much appreciate, but the fly buzzing around the real Merly ruins it since you already know which one is her. Finally, 2-3? Oh boy. Yeah, it's awful. It's bad. I like the concept on paper. It's cool, it boasts the strongest RPG elements in the game by far, but man, is the execution abysmal. First time playing? Have fun running in one direction for 10 minutes. Oh, but you played before? Really? You've played the game before? You're replaying it again? Oh, okay. Well, enjoy looking up the vault code online and beating the chapter in about 5 minutes flat. Huh. all this to say, there's really high highs and extremely low lows in Chapter 2, so yeah, it ranks above Lineland, but that isn't much of a compliment. Origami King's introductory chapter tasks Mario and Olivia with destroying the red streamer. This chapter isn't bad by any means, but it is extremely simplistic and one of the game's shortest. There's also no partner character at this point in the story, and the amount of hand-holding this early on in the game is atrocious. It feels like you're being interrupted in every battle with a tutorial by Olivia, and it's exasperating on replays. Both the Earth Elemental and Colored Pencil bosses are redundant and boring, and Pencil specifically is one of the worst designed bosses in the game. Overlook Tower is fine, and the visuals are gorgeous, but there really just isn't much else to say about this straightforward chapter. The conclusion of Origami King transpires in the aptly titled Origami Castle. Driven by his racist anger, King Ollie transforms Peach's castle into one of his own design. I enjoy the theming, music, and build-up that this short chapter provides. It's a surprisingly dark conclusion to the game, complete with horrific imagery, such as the stapler boss literally getting its jaw broken and dying. Dang. Kinda dark. As mentioned earlier, you also discover that Ollie's motivation for folding toads and flat folks is that he is literally racist, as he rages about anyone different than him. Wow, I didn't expect that. That's also pretty dark. The intro segment to the chapter with Bowser's airship really sucks. The cannon shooting minigame lasts forever and is so easy. The castle's challenges are fun, but falling and taking 100 damage is not, since it usually just insta-kills you. The final boss begins with a typical ring boss fight in which Ollie can turn into any of the 4 elementals. It's extraordinarily redundant to fight these again, and to make matters worse, Ollie also heals if you take too long to plan your move. Ugh. The second phase that utilizes Bowser is alright, I guess, if you don't mind shaking your controller like an idiot the entire time. Gameplay, am I right? Then the final segment challenges you to quickly unscramble a ring puzzle within a given time limit, or else you instantly game over. It's not fun, to say the least. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of the worst final chapters in the series, but it's definitely not miserable aside from the Bob-omb minigame and the final boss. At least it's short and not stuffed with filler, you know? Plus the ending cutscenes are pretty good, the music's great, so yeah, I don't know, it's average. The Thousand-Year Door finally makes its first appearance with Chapter 2's Great Boggly Woods. The fanbase usually labels this one as the worst, and well, yeah, I'd have to agree. It's a visual masterpiece, the subplot with the Shadow Sirens is fantastic, and the Punies are cute. However, the backtracking can get a little rough. Flurry is one of the weaker partners, the Puny AI can be problematic, and the chapter boss isn't very exciting. Lastly, maybe I'm just weird, but the music in the Great Tree drives me nuts. Not the standard music so much, but the puny music that plays when you have all the punies together exploring in the second half of the dungeon. It sounds so chaotic and intense, and I don't jive with it at all. It's kind of one of my least favorite tracks in the game. In summary though, it's not a bad chapter, but it's definitely the weakest of the first 2 games. Barely edging out Boggly Woods is another that is often looked down upon. Dark Days in Flower Fields marks the first appearance of a Paper Mario 64 chapter, and deservedly so. That game has remarkable level design. Unfortunately, Flower Fields is the worst it has to offer, but I do genuinely think it's still good and absolutely overhated by fans. The backtracking can be tedious, but you really only have to do it to revisit Lily and Rosie. But yeah, backtracking through the hedge maze is a chore to say the least, so it's definitely a negative point. While I like the theme alright, it is frustrating that the entire chapter is basically just one singular theme, while most of the game's chapters are diverse with several biomes or areas to explore. Rather than having a distinct dungeon and pre-dungeon area to explore, Flower Fields is just one large area. The music is also far from great and begins to bore over time, and Lackluster is one of the weakest allies in the game. The chapter is a bit unique in the fact it's essentially a giant trading sequence, and I appreciate the variety, but it just doesn't play out the best. There are some great elements on display though. Cloudy Climb is gorgeous and serene. Huff and Puff is one of the game's toughest bosses and one of my favorite bosses, and his music, as well as the Sun's music in particular, are top tier. The Peach segment following the boss is also the game's best. It tasks you with disguising yourself as various baddies to infiltrate the upper floors of the castle, and it's a pretty tense time, but, like, how does nobody notice Twink here when Peach is just walking around and Twink is right there? Taking us into the top 20 is Super Paper Mario's penultimate chapter, The Underwear. This may be my most polarizing placement yet, as I know many fans view this as one of the series' best, but for me, I just can't really get behind that. The concept, music, tone, and characters in the first 2 levels are fantastic. Easily the best thematic design in the entire game. Lovebee is a wonderful character, and her storyline is tragically depressing. Luigi is a blast to play with, the Underchomp is a fun moment, and the enemies are super neat. However, there's some truly awful stuff here, keeping it away from the top 10. Typical Super Paper Mario. Yeah, you know. The main issue is with the Over There Stair in 7-3. The level design is abysmal. There's no visual variety, so you get confused about where you are and where you've been, and it's such a pain to find the right apple to wake up Princess Peach. It's extraordinarily redundant. Another issue is the boss, Bonechill. While he is fantastically well designed, he takes mere seconds to decimate in cheesy fashion. Lastly, while I do like 7-2, the game forces you to play it twice. Yes, you heard that right. It's unacceptable for the Thousand-Year Door to have some mild backtracking, but forcing the player to climb up this level twice to satisfy some stupid old hag is... Let me check my notes here. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's fine. Everyone says that's fine, so I guess this chapter is just S tier anyway. Just kidding. It's not S tier. It's good, but it's not great. It could have been, though. It could have been. It really could have been great if it wasn't a better game. Ranked 19 is one of Super Paper Mario's best chapters, the Bitlands. I enjoy the unique bit-based art style in this one, and the 4 courses boast a good variety of biomes, including land, sea, tree, and fort. Francis is one of the game's best original characters. His dialogue is hilarious, as we all well know. The tree level is a definite highlight and one of the game's best platforming segments. The dating sim bit is a really fun twist that's a highlight for sure. I love making Peach go along with the romance until she finally just snaps and you can't control her anymore. She goes crazy. Always a good time. My frustrations with this chapter lie mostly with 3-2, which is a boring slog through the ocean, and the blooper boss is as mundane as it is uninspired. Finally, while I like the design and concept of Fort Francis, the layout is not good. You basically just navigate through the same handful of rooms 3-ish times, around 3 times each, and once again, Super Paper Mario demonstrates a failure in dungeon design compared to the first 2 games. Taking us out of the decent chapters into the great ones, let's talk about the Green Streamer. And once again, I'm going to ramble a little bit just because I've never gotten to talk about Origami King before. The Green Streamer is Origami King's 5th chapter, and it's easily in the better half of the game's many worlds. Where to begin here? It's huge, really. The first half of the chapter sees Mario team up with Kamek and Bowser Jr. to find and use 4 hot springs to heal Bowser Jr. back to his usual self. Thanks to the narrative setup, this chapter ends up having more RPG elements and less ring battling than most of the others. Shangri Spa is a lovely, beautiful location filled with lots to see and do, and the dialogue from Kamek and Bowser Jr. is a hilariously good time. There is a lot of dialogue that slows the pacing a bit, and the first half of the chapter does take an unfortunate dive when traveling to the 4th hot spring. The jungle area here just isn't very fun. You have to guess which of the branching paths is correct over and over, and if you choose the incorrect decision, there's a good chance you will instantly game over. It's incredibly stupid, but it is satisfying that Olivia always chooses wrong. Stupid piece of paper. I enjoy the inclusion of Shy Guy's finish last here. The series' many game shows always add much appreciated gameplay variety and fun, but this is possibly the worst of all of the game shows. In theory, it seems cool, but you only technically have to win 2 rounds to succeed, and half of the minigame options utilize the stupid ring mechanic. Not fun. Also, why the heck do I even need to win this stupid game? I already got the VIP card from the lobby. That entitles me to visit the Color Spring, right? What is this madness, eh? This is a ripoff. You know what? This chapter stinks. Anyways. Well, once Bowser Jr. returns to his former glory, you can finally beat the sumo guy in another not fun ring boss battle, and finally begin the second half of the chapter in Bowser's Castle. Thankfully, the second half is much briefer. I love the creepy, horrifying atmosphere and terrifying black paper enemies. Hanaconda is another frustrating boss fight that utilizes the ring mechanic and the stupid rock, paper, scissors gameplay, but at least he has a unique design and isn't, colored pencils or something. The following Buzzy Beetle real-time fight is a lot of fun, and then the chapter boss with scissors is one of the game's best stationary bosses. Well, except for the instant death bullcrap. Man, this game really tries my patience sometimes, but overall, it's not a bad chapter. Shy Guy's Toy Box suffers from the same problems that Flower Fields has. Rather than a fully realized dungeon preluded by an explorable overworld, the Toy Box is dungeon and overworld blended into one. The novelty of this chapter is the required backtracking into Toad Town for key items, and while I appreciate the twist from the typical gameplay loop, the back and forth isn't really my favorite thing. The singular theme and accompanying music once again grows stale by the end, and the repeated train rides grow tedious. With all that said, it's still a great chapter, if one of the game's worst. Kammy Koopa's treacherous subplot is clever, Anti-Guy is an amazing mini-boss challenge, the Lantern Ghost has a great design, and Watt is an adorable new ally. Though I always wonder how she recognizes Mario so immediately. Aren't you basically a newborn baby? Huh. The final boss is excellently designed and portrayed, but the actual gameplay of the fight is pretty rudimentary. Once destroying his bulb, he has only one move left, so the fight gets pretty repetitive. And we can't forget about Gourmet Guy. The guy loves cake, if you didn't know, and his Peach segment is a lot of fun. Overall, it's a great, if not fantastic, chapter. The second best Origami King chapter is undoubtedly the Blue Streamer, Chapter 2. The immediate highlight here is Bobby, who is surely the best partner-like character in the game. While he's quite awful in combat, his personality and characterization are fantastic. I just wish he was a full partner like in the older games, you know? He spends half this chapter staying behind, and you can't actually control him, so it's a real shame. Beyond Bobby, the chapter is absolutely gorgeous and accompanied by a wonderful soundtrack. It's easily the best looking chapter in the game. The first half of the chapter is great, and the second half at Shogun Studios is also a ton of fun. The boss is alright. I mean, it's still a stupid stationary boss, but at least it has some fun build-up. In fact, the stage play narrative that directly precedes the boss is a clever scenario and a decent bit of fun to experience, so it's charming seeing the fun set design and gameplay unfold, and the toads all being tied up. Aw, so sweet. So then, why isn't this chapter even higher? Well, for starters, I think Shogun Studios is a little bit too large and filled with many empty rooms that either contain a pointless reward or an enemy encounter. The river segment minigame is also atrociously tedious and far too lengthy. And lastly, this chapter contains some serious padding issues. Let me elaborate. Oh no, the river's dried up, so we can't go down the river. Okay, well, let's find some water. Oh no, Bobby disappeared and we need 2 people to enter the Vellumental Temple. Okay, well, let's go save Bobby. Oh no, helpless Bobby keeps falling again and again. Oh, okay, let's chaperone him up past several battles. Oh no, the river has water in it now, but Mario can't paddle a canoe. Okay, well, let's just find someone who can, aka this monkey. But oh no, the monkey ran away. Okay, let's get the tuna can, find people to open said tuna can, trick the monkey, smash monkey back into a toad, and finally play a stupid river minigame for coins. Yeah, It's messy. It's still a great chapter, but nowhere near the heights of those still to come. Thousand Year Door's penultimate chapter is a mixed bag with low lows and incredibly high highs, like incredibly high, beyond the atmosphere in fact. Yeah, of course the General White antics are cumbersome, traversing the moon is a slow drag, and the X-Naught base suffers from hallway design more than any other area in the game, but this chapter is still really great, I'm here to tell you. The canon cutscene never fails to send chills down my spine, it's truly epic. The music in the dungeon is incredible, easily one of my favorite tracks in the game. The interaction with TEC, puzzles, and battles are all great as well. The final showdown against Lord Crump is the best of the 4 matches, but definitely feels less climactic since you've already faced off with him so many times before. Storming Koopa Brothers Fortress, the very first full chapter in the series. It was an instant classic and acted as a virtual playground for me as a young kid. Let's talk first about the fortress itself. The music and ambience of the nearly vacant structure is amazing. The layout is vast and non-linear, the puzzles are great, and the frequent use of Bombette and Cooper are both welcome. I really love the first room with the bad Koopas just chillaxing in the water. They ain't worried about nothing. Waking them up with a fright later on always gives me a chuckle, and you can even get to see one of their rare animations. I also love how you can see Bombette in jail a bit before she actually joins you, and the manner in which the Koopa brothers are slowly introduced to you one at a time throughout your exploration. Speaking of, the Koopa brothers are some of the game's best original characters, and while their boss fight isn't too challenging, the music is S-tier perfection. Man, I sure hope I can fight them again later in the game. Yay! Also, the Bowser machine is dope. I love the peach painting inside. I'm not sure what that is suggesting though. The lead up to the fortress is fine. The fuzzy rampage through Koopa Village is a quick diversion that plays out well enough, and Pleasant Path is a fun early game jaunt. Not much else to say about these areas though, as they're relatively basic in approach for the first chapter in the game. All in all though, this is easily one of the best first chapters in the series. And so that brings us to the best first chapter in the series, Castle and Dragon. I've become very familiar with this chapter during my year-long production of the stop-motion Hooktail battle, and it's certainly iconic. While I think the dungeon is inferior to Koopa Brothers Fortress, it's otherwise a step up from 64's first chapter, and so I believe this to be the best Chapter 1 in the series. A lot of that comes down to Hooktail, Koops, and the subplot shared between them. While the Thousand Year Door's level design isn't always top tier, the storylines within each chapter always shine. It's quite moving to see Koops gain the courage to leave his small village and face great challenge to avenge his father. Hooktail is introduced in the very first moments of the chapter, and the build-up to the showdown with her is handled remarkably. Schwank Fortress, Petalburg, and the castle are all fun locations. The music is great, and the boss fight is one of the game's very best. I mean, come on, Hooktail eats the audience, offers for you to sniff her feet, and is massive. Way bigger than any boss in the first game. Koopa Brothers are no doubt great, but their boss fight has one move. This is a step up in every sense, so yeah, it's a great chapter. The dungeon is whatever, but Castle and Dragon is a wonderful start to an epic adventure. Ranked at number 12 is Super Paper Mario's best chapter, the epic finale, Castle Black. Gone are the cumbersome time wasters, the filler, the backtracking. Castle Black is a focused, cohesive, and well-designed dungeon that ends the game on a high note. The level design is solid, the music and atmosphere are pristine, and the minimalist visuals apply nicely to the game. I mean, most of this game is pretty ugly, in my opinion, so this chapter being all black and white actually helps it to stand out as being not ugly, if that makes sense. So I love how each level ends with a boss fight that reduces a member of Mario's party, and the final climactic encounter with Bleck is so good. The true final battle against Dementio isn't a great battle when it comes to gameplay, but ooh, that music. The Ultimate Show is one of the greatest boss themes in the series. The final cutscenes and bittersweet finale cap off this wonderful chapter and help make the bad parts of the game almost bearable. Almost. The Key to Pirates isn't just a clever punny name for a chapter title, but it's also a dang great chapter in itself. Yes, the backtracking through Keyhole Key is gross, but honestly, what else is there to complain about? I'm waiting. I'll keep waiting. I'll wait forever, because there isn't anything else to complain about, that's why. This chapter has Flavio, a great intro cutscene with the Ember attack, fun characters, one of the best designed dungeons in the game, Flavio, top-notch music, Cortez, who is amongst my favorite characters, an epic naval duel with Lord Crump, I mean, Four Eyes, and oh yeah, I can't forget that it also has Flavio, and he can ride you. It's a great experience. The chapter, I mean, never mind. But truly, I don't get the hate for Keelhaul Key and its mysterious ghost pirate. Really great chapter for me. And the best chapter from the Origami King finds itself ranked relatively high on the overall list. It is, of course, Chapter 3's Yellow Streamer. In fact, there's very little to complain about in surprisingly solid level. Kicking things off on the luxury liner, the Princess Peach, there are some creepy vibes, story beats, and a really great boss to experience. After retrieving Bobby's fuse and returning it to clear a boulder at Sweet Paper Valley, this game shocks everyone by having Bobby literally commit suicide. A shockingly bold choice for a Mario game. Now, on one hand, I respect the game for letting Bobby go out with a bang. It's a dark moment that adds much needed stakes to the adventure. On the other hand, since when do bombs and Paper Mario die upon detonation? Bobbery is fine. Bombette? Fine. But bizarre lore shifting aside, this is a great moment to kick off the chapter. The primary area you'll explore in this chapter is the desert in Sniff City. Sniff City is easily my favorite location in the entire modern trilogy. The visuals and design of the place is phenomenal, and the hotel pool party always gets a chuckle out of me. Also, the music of the entire chapter is the best in the game by far. Professor Toad is a decent accomplice in this chapter, and the level design of the two dungeons are incredible. The Fire Temple relies mostly on action combat and puzzles, and almost completely avoids any ring turn-based battles. The final dungeon is also a joy to explore, particularly the segment in which you play music to collect all the dancing toads with missing faces. It's hilarious stuff and utterly charming. Speaking of the final dungeon, the Hole Puncher final boss is easily the best boss in the game. Its gameplay is alright, but its characterization is fantastic, and best of all, the music. The music is so good, so good. Easily the best track in the entire game for me. It's genuinely perfect. I could do without the empty wide open desert, and the Snickering Sniff game is really bad, you know, since it will give you an instant game over if you screw it up. The pacing also takes a big hit when each of the statues, the Toad statues, you have to ignite them and rotate them since they utilize the copy-pasted dialogue and cutscenes. For each one you find, you look up at it, it shows a little cutscene, you do the Fire of Elemental thing, you place the stone, you watch another cutscene, Olivia talks to you, you exit, and then Olivia talks and looks back up at the tower a second time. It's a dull waste of time. But other than those nitpicks and the general ring-based battle system that's always annoying, this is a genuinely great chapter from a game I'm certainly mixed on. It's the closest the modern trilogy comes to reaching the heights of the first two games, and I give it credit for that. With Origami King wrapped up, only Paper Mario 64 and TTYD remain, and we have 9 chapters to go. Am I a bit biased to have a top 9 consisting solely of the first two games? Well, maybe, but then again the first two games are placed on a pedestal for a reason. Let's see how the remainder rank out. Paper Mario's second chapter is one that has grown on me more and more in recent years. I don't think it's highly ranked by most fans, and that's a bummer. The main highlight for me is the diverse locations explored throughout. Sure, they're all a desert biome, but the variety is strong here. Mount Rugged contains a lot of verticality, Dry Desert is vast and flat. The Outpost is a cool little town with a brief subplot, and Dry Ruins is a well-crafted dungeon. Let's not forget that each area has its own unique enemies that don't carry over from one to another. Off the top of my head, this chapter has 8 unique enemies, which doesn't even include the boss or Buzzar. Speaking of Buzzar, she is easily one of the best mini-bosses in the game, and I love how you can avoid fighting her if you just say you're Luigi. Everyone loves Luigi, even Buzzar. Parakarry is one of the game's most memorable allies. Colorado makes his first appearance, and hey, if you don't want to explore the massive desert, which is admittedly a bit empty, you can just walk in a straight line and avoid most of the screens. The reveal of the ruins is an epic, chilling sequence that plays out so much better than a similar unveiling in Origami King's Yellow Streamer. Tut and Koopa isn't a great boss fight, but I do enjoy the fun build-up to the duel that transpires throughout the dungeon. This chapter is really great, and I haven't even mentioned Wakka yet. This little fella was having such a good day until I ruined it. The big finale to Paper Mario 64 is epic in scale and stakes. As you finally reach the highest halls of Peach's castle, you tremble in fear and anticipation at the duel that is to come. Every battle, every choice you've made has led to this moment, and it does not disappoint. The lighting, visuals, music, and gameplay of the final boss come together so remarkably to form a badass duel against the Koopa King. Well, other than the scripted fight between Twink and Cammy, which, yeah, hurts the pacing a bit, just don't game over. You don't want to replay through that. Other than the final boss, the preceding areas are great as well. Peach's castle is dark and abandoned, which perfectly contrasts with the game's opening scenes, in which it is seen full of life and energy. Bowser has taken everything to ruin and must be stopped. Bowser's Castle is a mixed bag. It has some really awesome segments and some mediocre ones. I'm looking at you, Cave Maze, you ugly. Some of the areas are also too straightforward and linear, like the water level puzzle. There's no decision making or branching paths requiring you to think at all. It's a fully linear puzzle with no player choice or input. The cannon battle being repeated 4 times is pretty miserable as well, but at least all 3 guard doors are a lot of fun, and I especially enjoy fighting the triple anti-guy unit. Every ally is utilized throughout the massive dungeon. Well, every partner except for Goombario. Loser. Other highlights include the Duplighost Peach segment and my favorite dungeon music in the game. Maybe even the entire series. I love how the music ramps up with additional instruments as you progress closer to Bowser himself. This is one of those themes I have stuck in my head on the regular. Okay, we're almost done here, but one last thing. While I love seeing the Koopa brothers again, I really wanted to fight them. Come on, man, we fought Junior Troopa 5 times already. He should have stayed frozen in Shiver Snowfield. Nothing against Junior, but a Koopa Brothers rematch would have been absolutely epic. I hope that if the game ever gets a proper remake, that they restore the rematch into the final game. Hot Times on Lava Lava Island is one of my favorite chapters in the series, but I understand it's not always highly rated amongst the fanbase, and I'm not really sure why. I love it here. There are 3 unique and varied segments: exploring the jungle to find Yoshi Kids, reaching Raphael the Raven, and diving into the volcano itself. The non-linear jungle exploration is a blast, and numerous unique enemies are contained within. The Yoshis and Ravens are great NPCs, and Raphael is especially cool. This dude literally could take on Bowser himself. What a stud. Mario, take a seat. The puzzles and challenges in the jungle depths are solid, and you can finally ultra rank your partners. The music throughout the jungle and volcano is top quality stuff as well, and in the volcano especially, it puts you in an urgent rush, as if the place could erupt at any moment. Speaking of the volcano, it's easily the best of the 3 areas. The aforementioned urgency and sense of danger is so well articulated, and the lighting and effects of the lava are gorgeous for a Nintendo 64 game. Colorado is my favorite NPC in the game. His hilarious antics and injuries last the duration of the exploration, and always bring me a chuckle. Thinking of it now, he basically plays out like an Origami King partner, in which he joins you for a single chapter, isn't controllable, but does act as an extension to your party. Huh, never noticed that before. Lava Piranha is a sweet looking boss, but it is way too easy, especially when you have the right loadout. The fake out death does mix things up though, and the escape segment with Mistar really shakes things up since it occurs prior to the Peach segment. Talk about variety. The escape sequence itself is brief but does feel tense, and Colorado is hilarious as usual. Him calling Mistar a starfish is hysterical. I guess the old bean isn't the religious type, huh? Closing out the chapter is the funniest Junior Troopa segment, which I'm gonna count as part of this entry. So, in summary, Chapter 5 of the first game is one of the very best. Phew, I'm a bit worn out, but thanks for watching so far. As we move into the top 6, these are the best of the best. These 6 are all amazing masterpieces that, despite having flaws, represent the highest highs of the Paper Mario franchise. Each are some of my favorite levels in video game history. Let's take a look. It may just be the most loved chapter in the entire series, and TTYD's Chapter 3 of Glitz and Glory is certainly deserving of the title. In this chapter, Mario will need to take on the role of the Great Gonzales to infiltrate a mysterious fighting pit and retrieve the Crystal Star. While the explorable area in the chapter is notably small, the gameplay mostly revolves around completing 20 or so fights against opponents in the Glitz pit. While the combat does grow tedious, the requirements placed on Mario in each match add some variety to the proceedings. The best aspect of this chapter, however, is the mystery surrounding the pit. Grubba, Jolene, Rockhawk, they're all remarkable characters and amongst the game's very best. Although it isn't nearly as exciting on repeat playthroughs, I'll never forget the anticipation and intrigue I held for this chapter back in 2004. I do wish Glitzville was a bit larger and that the fights weren't quite so repetitive, and so that's why I can't quite put Of Glitz and Glory at the top spot, but as it stands, it's still one of the best this series has to offer, and it's the first time in the series where the developers completely shook things up. Now, if we can only get the Prince Mush boss fight in the remake, please Nintendo. Speaking of a shakeup, 3 Days of Excess is a splendid chapter from the Thousand Year Door and my 5th favorite overall. I'll be honest, as a kid this was my number 1 chapter, but I do believe that upon dozens of replays it does get negatively impacted. Like with Chapter 3, I love how this one tosses aside the usual gameplay loop in favor of something fresh. But unlike the Glitz Pit, Chapter 6 makes some opposite changes. Battles are nearly absent, for example, and you'll instead focus on trading sequences, mystery solving, and other narrative fun. I love trains, and I'm still a bit obsessed with the Excess Express. The passengers on board are cute and fun, and I enjoy the subtle nods to the mystery novel Murder on the Orient Express. I adore Poshley Heights, which makes for a lovely final area, and the detour at Riverside Station makes for a great mini-dungeon that gives a quick intermission to the train gameplay. I do wish the boss had a bit more build-up and was an actual character, you know, and instead of these smorgs, but I believe we were initially meant to fight the Shadow Sirens again in the Sanctum, and in general this chapter has the most cut content in the game. Also, like mentioned earlier, upon replays the trading sequence and the back and forth in the train can grow somewhat dull, but hey, I still think this is easily top 5 material. All in all, it's a gorgeous and lovely chapter that serves a nice break from combat before the game's final act. Ah yes, the classic example people use to exaggerate their claim that TTYD has an abundance of backtracking, Chapter 4, For Pigs the Bell Tolls. So yeah, the elephant in the room, backtracking. Ooh, scary, I'm scared. Look, if you don't like this chapter because of the backtracking, that's fine, but for me, it's not a huge deal. The back and forth between Twilight Town, what the heck is that? The back and forth between Twilight Town and the creepy Twilight Town and creepy steeple, Joe Pro, does grow old, but in a way, it almost benefits the theme and story of the chapter. Mario is isolated, abandoned, screwed over by this freak in a sheet, and to make matters worse, he is forced to traverse back and forth across this horrifying land, unable to escape the terror and hopelessly abandoned. Well, until Vivian shows up. Vivian, arguably the best original character in the game, the only one who supports and believes Mario even when his own allies do not. Of all of TTYD's chapters, this one easily has the best subplot story, by far, and in fact it's probably the best chapter story in the entire series. The core relationship of Vivian and Mario is outstanding, and I haven't even mentioned other story beats like villagers turning into pigs and all of Duplus's trickery. And it's not just the narrative. This chapter is gorgeous. In fact, it's my favorite looking chapter in the entire series, bar none. It's drop dead beautiful. Twilight Town, Twilight Trail, and the creepy steeple each have creepy but peaceful music as well, and the atmosphere and mood are perfectly portrayed. Thankfully, the remake has installed a warp pipe as well to alleviate the backtracking concerns, and so this chapter is now going to be pretty much perfection. Top tier stuff for sure. Wow. The top 3. We've arrived at the best of the best. The S+ tier of Paper Mario chapters. This whole ranking has been such a rush, so let's just sit back for a moment and relax. Take it all in. What wonderful games. They're so special. So charming. I really love them. This feels nice. Thanks for taking a moment with me. You're awesome too. Alright then. I went back and forth a ton on my second and third ranked chapters as I think they're both borderline perfection, but in the end I decided to settle on the invincible Tubba Blubba for third place. This chapter has an enormous range of instantly iconic locations to progress through, and some of the best characters in the series. Upon beginning the chapter, Mario and company enter Forever Forest. While the narrow hallway approach makes avoiding enemies a challenge, I kind of like the fear factor it adds to the area. The labyrinthine design of these lost woods are tricky, and the music is one of my absolute favorites. Nonetheless, I'll admit I'm about as happy as Junior Troopa when I finally escape the labyrinth and make my way to Boo's mansion. Wow. What a treat this place is. It's visually astonishing, has great puzzles and surprises, and features everyone's favorite original partner, Lady Bo. To be honest, she's the only partner in the first game that's portrayed with a TTYD level of character design, both in personality and writing, as well as in visual design. I will say that the Boo roulettes can be unfair if you don't know how to click through the dialogue when the Boo with the key item is right in front of you. Otherwise, you can easily and unfairly lose track of the sequence that they're in, but otherwise this place is peak level design. One of my favorite attributes of this chapter is the switch up in which the boss doesn't hold the Star Spirit, rather, Scholar had escaped and been re-imprisoned by Lady Bo. In a sense, she initially acts as an anti-hero who looks out for her own self-interests first and foremost, and those of her people. In fact, the entire chapter plays with your expectations, and it's stellar to see play out. Tubba Blubba's boss fights in particular are fascinating. Rather than Tubba himself being the tough challenge, it's the duel against his heart. Once his heart reunites with his body, he's an absolute pushover. Talk about a twist. Gusty Gulch is great as well, complete with an entertaining, albeit traumatizing, cutscene. Hey, I can't blame Tubba Blubba, I also love me some booze. The dungeon design is of high quality, complete with an excellent chase sequence and hysterical dialogue with Yaki. Finally, exploring the locked windmill is exciting, and the boss fight is relatively tough, if a bit basic. The boss music is also genuinely fantastic, and the culmination of Tubba's story arc is one of the game's very best. A truly top-tier chapter. Phew, you'd think I'd be tired, but I'll never get tired of talking about Paper Mario. Okay, so the original game's Chapter 3 is incredible, yes, but there is one chapter from the first game that is ever so slightly better. It's a narrow margin, sure, but A Star Spirit on Ice is absolutely brilliant, and my favorite chapter from Paper Mario 64. I've talked a lot before about how I enjoy the chapters that have several connected areas, especially those where each has its own unique music and visual flair. Well, Chapter 7 may all be snow-themed, but it contains 5 individual segments, each of which are really wonderful. Shiver City, Starborn Valley, Shiver Snowfield, Shiver Mountain, and the Crystal Palace. They're all so cool. No pun intended. It's a mammoth of a chapter. I mean, no other chapter or area in the game has 2 towns in it. I like towns. I like them a lot. The gameplay varies a ton from location to location as well. Shiver City places you in the midst of a subplot very reminiscent of TTYD, a penguin murder mystery. It's a good time, but it is a bit underdeveloped and resolves too quickly for my liking. Also, this her. Following this, Mario makes the trek to Starborn Valley, encountering Junior Troopa and Monstar along the way. Monstar is a fun story moment, and Starborn Valley is a gorgeous, isolated little town filled with lots of twinks. Wait, what did I just say? Let's cut that out. Remember to cut that out, JoePro. There is a small amount of backtracking, but it's fine. Once you enter Shiver Mountain, things really heat up, or, cool down. The lead up to the dungeon feels like a dungeon in itself, with its great combat and entertaining puzzles. You also get your first instance of Duplighost trickery, this time where they take advantage of our sweet pal Cooper. After entering Crystal Palace, you'll pretty quickly realize it's the game's best dungeon by far. It boasts fun puzzles, a great theme, hilarious Duplighost shenanigans, and an outstanding final boss battle. The only downside here is he is one of only 2 chapter bosses in the game who has no build-up. In other words, we don't get to see or hear from him at any point until the battle itself. It's a minor nitpick, but actually, maybe it's a good thing. I mean, he's incredibly mysterious and stands on a cliff on the edge of the earth, so perhaps the late unveiling of him plays well into that idea. I don't know, man. I just think he's cool. Pun totally intended that time. Anyway, I've talked all this time and haven't even touched on the music. Good lord, it's legendary. So good. Crystal Palace is the obvious standout, as is the boss theme, Freeze, but the entire chapter contains the best collection of music in the entire OST. 10 out of 10 chapter. Well, that brings us to the final chapter on the list. The best of the best, our number 1. Have you already figured out what it is? I'd assume so. And I don't expect many of you to agree with me, but my favorite chapter is easily TTYD's epic finale, The Thousand-Year Door itself. It is absolutely incredible and my favorite level from any video game ever. Let's talk about why. For one, the entire game builds to this. There's so much mystery and intrigue that surrounds the door, and as you progress through the game, you begin to realize it may be much more dreadful and dangerous than you possibly imagined. Once inside, the music, visuals, and tone leads to an empty melancholy that is actually kind of terrifying. Everything down here is evil, demonic, and wants to kill you. This is a Mario game like you've never seen it before. You're no longer playing around. This is life or death for our heroes. Beyond the appropriately dreadful atmosphere, the level design is varied, flawless, and engaging. Just when you may grow bored of the red carpeted hallways, you'll stumble upon the Tower of Riddles. This massive underground lake and tower are a welcome intermission from the Palace of Shadow, and the puzzles within are excellent, as is the tonal music. All of the mini-bosses are fantastic, in particular the duel against Gloomtail and the double-header fight against Grodus, Bowser, and Cammy. This chapter is surprisingly challenging, and as a kid I recall having a pretty tough time all around, but it's not so bad for me these days. I talked a lot about the mood earlier, but the ambient music in the weird room just before the throne room, and the music in Gloomtail's room are especially underrated. They're just simple atmospheric humming sounds, but dang are they spooky. They're kind of demented sounding, like I honestly can't believe these are in a Mario game, you know? I love it. After beating Grodus, things aren't looking so good for Princess Peach and our heroes. I'm not going to do a play-by-play of the final boss, but to me, the battle, stakes, and cutscenes are the most epic moments in any video game I've ever played. Again, this is life or death, but for everyone, or at least for every character we've met on the entire adventure. The ending cutscenes and closure to the game are excellent, and I'll cherish them always. Even when all is hopeless, our heroes prevail. Honestly, this story is almost too good for a Mario game. It's wild, and it's perfect. I honestly have no complaints for this chapter. Some would say that if you need to backtrack from the final boss back to Rogueport, it's a terribly mundane task, but like, just don't backtrack then. You're not intended to, there's no reason to. Okay, so like, if I were to backtrack from deep within the chapter to hit the nearest shop, it would seriously impact the tension, suspense, and tone that the level so immaculately builds. It's a gauntlet of challenges not meant to be interrupted with arbitrary errands, you know? So like, yeah, I mean, you can backtrack, but there's no point to it. Just come prepared, and you're good to go. So yeah, no other complaints from me. I think it's perfect, and it's easily my favorite chapter in the series. That's really all there is to it. Well, my friends, that was a lot. But Before I wrap this up, let's see how each game ranks as an average. Sticker Star averages out to a 40. Color Splash comes in at 32, not very good. Super Paper Mario averages out to a decent 25 ranking, and Origami King ranks in slightly better at a chapter average of 20th. Not bad. And for our final two games, they're obviously quite close in their rankings, but Paper Mario 64 comes in with an average ranking of 10th, and the Thousand Year Door slides in barely ahead with a 9.6 average. It was very, very close. So yeah, the difference between those last two is definitely immaterial. If you'd like to see how I rank the games themselves, I'll be doing my full series ranking, including the TTYD remake, on May 31st. Lastly, you want to know how many times I said chapter throughout this video? Well, it's a disgusting amount, and I did count, and it's disgusting, but I'll tell you, 162. I never want to say the word chapter ever again. I just said it again, didn't I? 163.